Hey Connor, let's go through your Rapsodo session. So here are the numbers, just so you can take a look at them, nice and slow. We threw 15 pitches. A couple of those were curveballs, and they didn't register because it has that 45 mile an hour minimum trigger. So a few things jump out at me. First, I always look at the velocity first, but beyond that, I then look at spin direction. And if you look at these spin directions, I would say I could calculate the average, but it looks to be averaging around 150, give or take. Some of them are a little bit lower at 126, 120. Some of them are a little bit higher at 206. Probably want to tighten that up a little bit and just make it more consistent. Maybe aiming to have only 15 minutes of variation on the release on the spin axis. But that is what it is. It's just interesting information for me to know. With a slightly lower spin axis, and what I mean by that is closer to 3 o'clock than 12 o'clock, you're going to see your horizontal break numbers, especially on certain pitches, be a little higher than your vertical break. If it was more like 1 o'clock or 12:45, you'd see the opposite. You'd see a very high positive vertical break and less on the horizontal break. Horizontal would be the pitch going this way more than normal. Vertical, the pitch falling less with gravity. So, taking a look at this, these two pitches jump out at me a lot because you can see on the horizontal break, it's at 20, which is crazy high for your age, and then 17. So these two pitches are particularly interesting. I want to show you how much something like that jumps out at me. Let's just click on this one that I did with my team. And if I direct your attention to this movement spray chart, look at 20. Nobody's even close to 20. All these pitches, and nobody's close. So this, you could have stumbled on something very interesting with these pitches. And I would try and maybe find that again. How did you create that much? And it's in two different ways in which you created this amount of horizontal break. Through one of them, you lowered your spin direction, so it's spinning more close to 3 o'clock. That's one way to increase that. And then the other one wasn't nearly as low, but you spun the ball way better. This is actually a very elite spin rate for the velocity. This is not. This is below average. How you figure out whether it's average or not is you divide 1312 by 48. If that number is above 25, that's very elite spin. That's going to be above 25. If it's closer to 2021, which is this, then that's lower spin rate. And the faster you spin the ball, the more it allows the spin axis to do its thing and translate into movement here. So what I would encourage you is try and spin the ball as much as you can. Spinning the ball is universally going to be a better outcome than not spinning the ball with certain pitches, such as a splitter, which you're not throwing a splitter right now, where you're trying to reduce the spin rate. But in general, more spin is better. So that can just be something that's interesting. A lot of the times you can trade a little bit of velocity for more spin, and that might be desirable as well. All right, so that's interesting thing number one. Maybe just experiment with spinning the ball as much as you can, and just knowing that that's a good thing. I think that's a pretty awesome breakthrough because you're going to see the pitch move more in these columns more. All right, so spin efficiency. Your spin efficiency is pretty good. It's in the 90s for most of it. This one we added a little bit of cut to it, and this one here. So by and large, it's in the mid to upper 90s. Obviously, on those pitches that have a little bit of gyro spin, we want to work to eliminate that. Or if it was the other way around, I'd say keep the gyro spin and let's throw a two-seam fastball. But because the spin efficiency is high, I'd say keep it four-seam. I mentioned before that your spin axis almost approaching 2 o'clock makes you a potential candidate for a two-seam fastball. It's better to have around 15% gyro when you throw a two-seam. So I think that we should stick with just the regular four-seam fastball. And instead of trying for horizontal break and reduced depth, we should just go for the horizontal break. This pitch really does stick out at me. Look at that vertical break. If you can squash that vertical break down as low as you can, and then add a little bit of gyro, oh man, if you just took that spin efficiency, put it there, it'd probably reduce the amount of horizontal break down to 15, but also squash that and even drive it down through seam shifted weight. Oh man, that would be good. Anyways, actionable. Let's get actionable. One thing jumped out at me. So you're throwing not hard here. So 53 is about your game average at the time of filming this. And you can notice that the release height is max 4.2 and minimum 4. Now look what happened when you threw hard. This is about your game average. Your release height jumped and your spin direction reduced more towards 12 o'clock. Basically, you changed your arm slot when you threw higher. So you probably, it would be hard to see, but you have to develop a feel for this. You really want your arm slot to be exactly the same, even if you're throwing a little bit less hard. That can be some actionable information for you. So this right here, release height, just for clarity, is just measuring how high the release point is. We have to take this number for a grain of salt because our Little League built a bullpen mound and they built it on top of the other mound. So it's basically a 19-inch mound. So obviously the release height numbers will be a little bit off, a lot of bit off. So just take them as relative to one another instead of as an absolute. Yeah, so I just wanted to mention that. Okay, so let's take a look at that one. Actually, let's go to one that's a little bit lower. It'll be difficult to see, which is why it's helpful to have these measurements here. So this is with a slightly lower arm slot. Right here. And then let's go up to this one. Yeah, you can see if you rewind, his previous arm slot, because the camera hasn't moved, was at the top of the F as the tip of there. So he raised it up to, he's like, I'm going to throw this one hard. So that can be something to work on. Look, going back, I want to show you that one again, where it was at 4 feet release height. Well, just look at the F. You can use the F in Fullerton. Yeah, you see how it just like skimmed the F and the other one was above the fence. So keeping the arm slot consistent, that's very actionable information to work on. And you'll have to develop a feel for that. That's all I have on my initial kind of thoughts here, which is, hey, spin the baseball. If you want to drop your arms, you're not really dropping your arm slot. This is kind of like your comfortable arm slot, and then work on spinning the ball more. And then when you throw hard, probably keep your arm slot more consistent, or conversely, keep your arm slot higher, and then we can work for a little bit more like these numbers. This is a little bit more typical, where they're kind of even with each other. That's very vanilla. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just like how every pitcher is. So you're within like a normal distribution of pitchers, whereas this was an outlier. Now, something to keep in mind, even though I've alluded to it, is that if you drop the arm slot, it's going to be a little bit harder to throw harder. It also does transfer the stress more to the elbow as opposed to the shoulder. When you throw more close to overhand, it's the shoulder that kind of is the weakest link. And then you take the arm out, it's the elbow that's the weakest link. Just food for thought and stuff to keep in mind. All right, that's my first reaction to this.